one of the, from this morning, the blue sheet,
Very
but I
sweet.
signed your name for
Oh,
you.
thank you. I thought you were gonna tell me I missed one
I
of
knew
those,
you were here.
I thought I missed one of those forms.
Just the, no.
Right, yeah, I don't care about that. Thank you.
I'm going to call the meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everybody. Just as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded, and in the future, we are going to be streaming our meetings. This one will not be live streamed, but it should be posted on the website.
Yep.
So, just want to make sure, everybody looks their best. So, with that, I would entertain a motion for approval of the minutes from our previous meeting.
So moved. Support.
Stacy and Mike, any comments or questions? Hearing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Mr. Meinke.
Well, a couple things just to bring you up to speed on. We had kindergarten registration starting last night. We had lots of kids coming out, good numbers of students showing up. I'll have more information on how many numbers there were, but they're going on right now as well, the second night of kindergarten registration. There's bounce houses, Mr. Kitchen's there as a DJ, all sorts of fun stuff, and it was really kind of neat to see my first time with kindergarten registration, but all of the different elementary schools had a table, their PTO was there, and kind of a neat thing I learned was that staff members participate in the PTO here in Swartz Creek, which is neat. They were there, they were passing out books to kids, t-shirts, so our kids really get taken care of. There's a lot of really neat things that they get as they're coming into the school, and it was a great opportunity last night for me to get to meet some of the parents as they're coming into our school for the first time, and many of them with their first child, so that's an experience that's a big deal to them, so it was fun. I also have a thank you card here this past week for those of you that were able to. I know several of you were able to go to the Elms Road variety show, and so this is a thank you card that I'm just going to pass around from the staff and from Mr. Kitchen. And I don't know, Mr. Ahern, do you have anything to share about a glove that was given to you?
I must have missed that when we were there.
I was hoping that because we've been so busy today, that you would forget
Did I
that.
forget about that?
Now I have to explain it real quick.
Okay.
He threw his hat in the audience, a child in front of it, student in front of us caught it. I leaned over to Lorraine
Oh, that's right, when he's
and I said, I want the glove. And then she went and blabbed to Mr. Kitchen after, and then you graciously gave me the glove.
That's right. There it is. That's great.
But I'm going to try to make some good out of it. I looked it up, and
I think it's in here.
Michael Jackson's glove auctioned off for $350,000.
Wow, there you go.
Maybe next year we can auction off Mr. Kitchen's glove.
Mr. Kitchen's glove. Maybe I'll start approaching this. That's awesome. Well, yeah, that's what I have for celebrations for tonight.
Okay. Any additions to the agenda?
There are no additions. There's something for 13A that I will probably want to just advise you on before you make a vote on it.
Okay.
So,
Without any changes, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Mike, Stacy, any comments or questions? Hearing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Back to you, Mr. Meinke.
all right. So at our last meeting, we had a couple of questions about mileage for the MASB consultant who was here for superintendent search. I have reached out to them, and we are going to be able to do a reimbursement. Essentially, what we're going to likely do as a part of our contract with them, they were supposed to provide us, or they will provide us with a free workshop. And based on today, I think we're good without the workshop, so they'll reimburse us the cost for the mileage. The other one is personnel resources at the staff that are working at the Performing Arts Center. And so I dug into that a little bit, and it's definitely something that I'll be, monitoring and looking at. Obviously, we always want to be extremely efficient with our staff and our resources that we have. about 50% of the time of the staff that are over there, about 50% of their time is spent doing management of actual events. Whenever there's a show, sometimes we have external shows, sometimes we have shows that are done by students. They do need to be staffed, and so that's about 50% of the time that they spend. About 20% of the time they spend with ticketing, marketing, sales. 20% is working with technology and building PowerPoints, slides, and things like that for promotion materials. And then there's been about 10% of the time recently spent doing some arts integration work, which, as you know, we had a grant with the Kennedy Center, and so one of our staff members went out, was trained, and they actually have started to come and work with several of our classroom teachers on how to incorporate arts, movement, and integration into a classroom lesson. So you might think of students that are studying geography, or they're looking in elementary school at memorizing the states, and so instead of just looking at a map, they actually might put something on the ground where the kids have to go and stand on the different states and move when they're called out. And so different things like that incorporate movement and arts and drama into the classroom. The other thing that I wanted to report out, and I know I shared a little bit about this this morning, I was asked to look into the purchase of a grand piano. Grand pianos are surprisingly not affordable, and something that I was not aware of because I've never been in the market for a grand piano. But as I looked into them, there are a variety of different options and ways to go. As we look at the size of our auditorium, we consult with a few different people. It looks like a 9-foot grand piano is going to be what we would recommend for that space, and that would fill the PAC without the need for microphone. And that's the type of instrument that would draw people. It would be an appropriate instrument for the space. So I think, Ken said last time, we went this far, and we don't necessarily have an instrument that fits that space. So a 9-foot grand would do that. Now, 9-foot grand pianos are very expensive, brand new, but I think that there's an opportunity if we were to go for a public bid and look for a piano, because all of these pianos are going to be over our spending threshold by state statute. So we would have to engage in an open bid process, or it's actually closed bid process, I should say. And so the way that would work is we would want to, with your permission, if you give us permission, it doesn't have to be a formal vote, we will actually go and start putting that bid out. And what we'd be looking for is a new or used 9-foot grand piano, and that would be put out there, and we would go through the closed bid process, and then we would have something for the next board meeting in March for you to look at and make a decision on where to purchase. I'd make a recommendation, but you would be making that decision at that time. So I guess the question is, informally, are there any objections, I should say, for me to go putting that out to bid?
No.
Okay. All right. So we'll engage in that process, and then at our next board meeting, I should have a recommendation, and we will have put it out. We have to get it on the website, get it in the newspaper. There's got to be a number of days that's posted, and so we'll put that out there. Yes.
Mr. Luke, is he included in this conversation? I'm assuming that
He will be. He's been consulted, as has the, we've had several people that have been consulted, both Mr. Luke and then also several staff members that work in there on a regular basis, teachers that are working in the music department. So, yes, and actually there's another gentleman that comes over and plays for some of our choral concerts and things like that, and he's even weighed in on it. So there seems to be a lot of excitement that's been generated. So, and it is an exciting thing. So one of the things that we'd like to do, however this works, we would like to look at doing a fundraiser for the purpose of that. And there are some ideas such as holding a concert where we actually bring a pianist in, and then we would have people who could buy keys. So people that are, feel so moved to do that, they could purchase keys, and then that would help to offset whatever payments we would have for the piano itself. So we would want to do a little fundraising, to offset our costs as much as we can. So.
step back to 6B for a second?
Yep.
On the last one, you said there was 10% for classroom construction. Is this deal a grant that we're working with?
So,
Is there any, I guess what I'm asking
That's a
is,
great question.
is that money, can it be recouped?
yep, so we have about 10% of his time, which is taking what he learned. The grant covered essentially, well, it covers a couple things, and Rod, I think you might know a little bit more about that grant than I do, which you could speak into that. But the grant isn't necessarily a direct funding to us as much as it is allowing the cost of the conference and the cost of several other things. But what he's been doing is, so he went out and he was trained in this arts integration. He's come back into several of our classrooms and started to show the teachers how to implement these types of lessons into the curriculum. So, Rod, could you speak on that a little bit further?
Yeah, a lot of the, you're right, it's not a grant as in you're pulling in money, it's a grant as in they're giving resources, training, PDs, and time, connecting the Kennedy Center to the Whiting, and then bringing things to us. So you have all these different people from music to drama to, whatever it is, showing how you can basically do instruction with different types of movement and music, and that then goes to the staff. So what we receive is a lot of staff training and different methods.
So is the training done during the school day, or is it being done as PD with that group of teachers?
Yes, it's a good question. So the first one is his training was he actually left the site, and that's part of what that grant paid for. So he went out and was trained. Now he's coming back, and so he's doing it within the school day with the kids, with the teacher. So he would go in with that teacher, kind of shoulder to shoulder, and model for them, like, this would be an example of a way that you could use one of these lessons or strategies, and then the teacher is watching, and then hopefully then that can be transferred, and that teacher can do it on their own. And then at upcoming professional development sessions, there could be potential for us to have those types of offerings where teachers could he would actually be running one of those workshops. That would be the expectation.
Yeah, there's both a job embedded and after school. So the job embedded is obviously when he goes into the classroom, but because of the partnership with the Whiting, they are able to pull local talent up and say, run a session from like 4 to 6. I know that they did one, and they had like 6, 7 elementary teachers come over and participate. So the grant kind of connects people and allows the Whiting to say, okay, come on out, and we're going to run X, Y, and Z from here to here, and then it's open to any teacher in Creek to come in and take advantage of it. So it's both job embedded and after school.
Okay. Good.
Okay.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have board subcommittee reports. We met for agenda review, reviewed the agenda that you have in front of you that we adopted tonight. And this morning, we had a board retreat, and Mr. Mike facilitated the retreat, did a very fine job. I know you put a lot of work into that, and for that we're very grateful. And we did a variety of things, including some team building, which was very interesting. Allowed us to learn a little bit more about each other, and that was very helpful. We also talked about some of our roles and our norms. We'll continue to work on those types of areas. And then looking at our meeting structure and agendas going forward, what that might look like. And that was pretty much the premise of the morning. Looked at some other schools for benchmarking to see how they do their agendas, how they carry out their operational meetings, and it was very interesting and very helpful. Anything I missed? Anybody? Okay. And then we had academic achievement.
We did. On the agenda for that was on March 10th, I'll have an overview, a PD overview, which will be 5th through 9th grade staff. It'll be at the PAC. Then it will be the MAMSE conference. It will be 8 to 3, and it runs until 4. First session starts at 8. There'll be Elms Road staff. That will be at Elms Road, Leader in Me training from 8 to 3. K through 4 staff, Cyrene, Moorish, Jeek, and Gaines. That will be at Moorish. Edify training, building grade level assessment, Ed Camp. from 8 to 3, and 10th through 12th grade staff. At the middle school, Anita Archer training and departmental work, 8 to 3. They had restoration practices, which I'll let you touch a little bit more on that. Maybe.
So, as you know, we're in the My Blissey grant, and half of My Blissey deals with behavior and expectations for our district. And also coming, into law through the state is some restorative practices. So both in the grant and from the law, we're looking at different ways that we can help kids solve conflict. Some of the zero tolerance policies will not be able to be withheld under the way they're currently structured, and we're just looking at ways to get some PD in, train people, talk about conflict resolution, so that we can help kids learn from their mistakes and move on.
And they also had COL chat, and Mr. Van Nynka was the star. No,
Yeah.
he was the guest on there. So I did get on it a little bit, but I got off after a little bit too, because it was interesting, but I really didn't. There wasn't much for me to answer, but anyway, so that's what we touched on.
One of the things that, just to reinforce what Rod was saying about restorative practices, these are things that have changed in the actual statute and laws here in Michigan. And so we will need to be looking, as we go through policy review in the future, we're going to have to be looking at those and where we have to make adjustments to that. Restorative practices are now legislative mandates, so we have to look differently about the way that we conduct expulsions, suspensions, some of those types of things. So we'll have more conversation at future meetings about that, but this is kind of a first intro just to let you know that exists, and then we'll get you much more information in the future about that.
Tony, do you have any amendments? Yeah.
Nailed it.
Right, nailed it. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Mike, are you going to do building and site, or are you prepared to do building and site?
I will.
I
Okay.
can help you too, but
Thanks.
Okay. If you look in your committee meeting notes, you'll see that we're still discussing the summer projects. And number one in there is the bleachers. And we had quite a bit of talk about that. Original plan was to replace all the bleachers on the east side and the bleachers up on the stage. Well, we didn't think it's wise to replace those bleachers that are on the stage, because at some point we want that stage out of there because we don't need it because of the pack. And it seems foolish to spend money on bleachers up on that stage. The cost to take the HVAC and the electric out underneath and to move everything out of that stage area makes it prohibitive at this time to do that. We would only be able to put the new bleachers on the top. Our recommendation is going to be that we hold off on that until we can do it right the first time. And that's where we're at on that. All the other items, if you look on the second page, you'll see the picture of the sign that's going to go up at the entrance of the PAC at Miller Road. It isn't going to look exactly like that. We're going to scratch the mask and the music and whatever that other thing is. We're going to leave the Sports Creek logo, and at the top we're going to put Sports Creek Schools Performing Arts Center. And there will be lights on the sign. We also informed Mr. Chapman about the street light at that corner, the consumer light hasn't been working. He's going to get with consumers so that hopefully it'll light up that entranceway better and will help when we get the sign. The other thing we start talking about, and I'm sure Mr. Maker's going to talk about it later, but is a facility study that we'd like to do in the future. Basically, Tony, was there anything else?
No, that was it. Was the big discussion? And then the sign. So now that was it.
What we had talked about with the sign is that while we like that it's got some different graphics on it, it's not as clean. And so I think for consistency, it'd be nice to see it red, white lettering, put our logo there, and just make it a little cleaner, you know, so that we can get more consistent across the district with that. And then, as Mr. Ahern had just described, the facility study, there are outside companies that do facility work that look at, you know, the age of your roof all the way to the condition of your classroom furniture, and they will come in at a very reasonable price, but this is what they do, and they will help us to get some better information to our building and site committee, as well as you as a whole board, on the condition and state of all of our facilities and assets as a district. So that will help us in the future as we plan and move forward, not only making purchases, but also thinking about what types of things we need to prioritize. So.
Do we know the cost of the sign yet? Did you say that? I didn't hear you say.
Did what?
The cost of the sign, do we have any idea? Even
What
a
did he
range?
say?
24.
I don't have my notes, I don't, it was minimal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not, and I believe he's gonna be able to get it up relatively quickly.
2 weeks.
He said within 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
2 week lead time, maybe 2,400 for both of them.
Oh, okay.
I think for some reason that number sticks in my head.
I thought it was around $300. It wasn't
Okay.
a large amount at all.
We can get some info on the cost. though.
I'm just
Yeah.
curious.
What were the
Well worth it.
entry doors at Mary Crapel? Which, front, back, side?
They're all interior doors. All the doors he's talking about there, he said were interior doors. Oh no, that's his entry doors. Didn't he say interior doors?
Under the elementary schools, I thought.
At the elementary schools, yes, there are interior doors. And the big project for the summer, for safety purposes, is the finishing off the new key system, so that if you know, any person had an emergency, that there's one key, there's a master key that can open those classrooms. And so we're working with Fenton Lock on getting those set up so that we can access every classroom that we would need to. The other thing that we talked about at the meeting was those the exterior door numbers. So for law enforcement and things like that, they would have that. So I know Mr. Sapanic's not here, so we're trying to do this the best we can. I think the other thing that you just want, you know, just to make you aware, we have a water system that needs to be replaced, not replaced, that needs to, there are some canisters with media for your filtration system, and out at Gaines, that is at the point where it needs to be replaced, because obviously there's arsenic levels in all water, and we don't even want everything that has happened. We want to be on the extra safe side, so we're going to, you know, invest some of those dollars to make sure the water is very safe out there. Just replace those canisters, and that usually needs to be done once every 10 years, 8 to 10 years. So we learned a little bit about that at Building and Site as well.
One more question. You have restrooms at the middle school in Deke. Are you still working on Mary Crapel?
We talked about that 2 meetings ago. I don't think we talked about it this time.
No.
The last that I recall, Mr. Minka directed Bill to remove the one stall.
Yeah, there's not a lot of to make an additional stall. There wasn't necessarily enough room to get multiples in there, just the age of the building and where it was. So, you know, looking at minimal cost on that.
So I can add that to your, or not to this meeting. You didn't talk about it at all at this meeting?
Not
No.
this meeting.
No, the one
Okay.
before we did.
Okay.
So that,
It's still
Project?
we haven't finalized that list.
Okay.
the entry doors, they're exterior doors, and then the ones at the middle school and Deke are interior doors?
The interior doors were the lock systems. The entry doors from Mary Crapel, the middle school, and Deke they're actually hopefully not butchering this, but I think they're fiberglass. So there's the older metal doors that are rusting out and the bottoms are coming out. There's several doors on all those buildings that need to be replaced, the entry doors.
Okay.
Jody.
And then the key system, I didn't quite understand that either. Is that to have a master key, a district-wide master key, or for the building?
Yeah, so it's for both. So if a police officer or an administrator needed to get into a classroom for any reason, there are some, we're about 60%, did you say? 60% complete across the district. So a master key would open 60% of our doors district-wide. The other 40% is a hodgepodge of a couple different keys. So if we had to get into a space that, you know, we'd be looking for 3 different keys, which loses time in an emergency.
Right.
So it's getting with Fenton Lock to recore the doors so that they all work on one key.
Right.
So whether it be law enforcement or an administrator or at the building or district level.
And what's when we were talking about the gym and the bleachers, what happened to the locker rooms at the high school?
Locker rooms at high school?
It's still on track. We haven't finalized, but just,
I know Brian's not here and the notes will be emailed, but it'd be nice to see some dollar values attached to this.
I can ask them for that.
For what, whatever happened, because the one I'm really interested in is the gym and the high school bleachers, and decide to tear the stage down.
Okay, we didn't have an estimate other than, I don't think you gave an estimate,
for what, the bleachers?
at $140,000 for the entire package as we initially talked about.
Just bleachers.
That would be just for the bleachers, and
Yeah.
then I don't remember if you had said this before, but you had brought up the point of, and we had all agreed, if we put the bleachers up and we spend $140,000, and then something happens in the future when we're trying to upgrade facilities, and we have to tear that stage out, we've already invested this money, and we found that we can't just reuse those bleachers as is because they can't just add more to them.
Correct.
So the idea was, it's roughly, I think he used the word $60,000 in demolition cost with all of that, and that's without being able to really get in there and see all of the electrical, HVAC, and remember all the electrical outlets that are up on that stage, once they tear the stage out, they all have to also be moved down to be code compliant. So a $60,000 was our very light estimate, or a general estimate, and what we had just decided was at that price tag, we felt it would be better, the committee felt it would be better to not spend the money and do it part way. We'd rather wait till we can do everything in one fell swoop, so we get the bleachers, the stage, and everything at a time when, you know, we can afford to do that. And we did have quite an extensive conversation about making, I mean, the first question that I think Tony and Brian and Mike both asked were, are the bleachers safe? You know, are they safe? And I think the assessment was very clear that they are safe. And since they're safe, can we hold off on this for a couple years until we can afford to do the stage and bleachers all in one package so that it gets done right?
2 comments. One, so we don't go over budget, we might want to have someone actually come in and look at it and give us a real estimate, addressing the wiring, addressing the removal of that stuff. Are we going to have to reduct anything?
Would we go to do it in a couple of years?
Come and give us an
I
estimate.
would say now, to see what the price really is. And then my second question is, in reference to money to do something like that, how bad is the boiler at Moorish? I mean, is that truly something that has to be replaced? Is it the original boiler? Does it break every month? Does it break every week? Are we replacing it because it's on a timeline to be replaced? Because I'm guessing that boiler is going to be around $100,000.
He said he got it 10.
10 grand?
He said 10 grand because he has guys who install it himself.
In-house.
In-house is gonna install it. They gotta buy the boiler and they're installing it.
We should have been doing that for years.
That's what he said.
I remember them saying
Yeah.
that, yeah.
We're gonna install it ourselves with the boiler, I think maybe 12,000.
But I do think as we kind of get closer to this, by next month, we need to have some dollar figures here. I can ask to get an estimate on the demolition cost, actually have someone give us a quote for that too.
Well,
But, can I say something?
Mhm.
But if, this is for Ken, if we already think it's $60,000, we can't, I don't think we can afford to add $60,000 to the 140. So, I think that becomes a mute question at this point.
I don't.
Unless you want Bill to do it.
I think it's something I think it's something at some point in time we need an accurate answer for.
So could, I'm sorry, during the facility study, do they have the capacity to assess that area?
Well, they can assess the condition of it, but that wouldn't be doing it as, they're not contractors to do the actual work, so,
Just to see how extensive
yeah.
the work would be after they do the demo.
Well, I don't think it's gonna cost us much of anything if we wanted to get a quote, and then maybe you'll have some better information to look at.
Well, I think you've got a couple things at stake there. You've got an electrician bill, kind of like we had an electrician bill when we put in the car wash, or the bus wash. We had a plumbing bill over there that we didn't address. Here we have whatever the ductwork system is, whether we're going to seal it up or replace it or have to reroute it.
Mhm.
So I think these are the group of people we need to have come in there and go, hey, what are we going to need? Because I agree with you. If the $60,000 isn't there, the 100 isn't, or the 80. But let's find out, because why would we do something halfway?
Oh,
That's
that's
why
our
we're not-
point.
That's why we're not doing it.
Yeah,
We agree.
Are we talking about doing half the gym?
We
No.
agree.
No, they're
Not
gonna
all.
The whole
wait,
thing.
everything.
Okay,
The whole thing.
Yeah.
okay. I took it as you were gonna put
No, no,
bleachers
no.
on one half.
No, no, the whole thing, we're killing the whole thing.
I do have a question for you, Mike, though,
Because it didn't
or
make sense to
somebody.
do
When you
all
said
of it.
safety of
No, that'd
bleachers,
be 100.
who made that they were safe? Only, and I'm not saying they don't know what they're doing, but we were just there for a competition, and I watched two people almost fall down those, and my dad was one of them. Like, they don't seem very sturdy to me. Not that I want something done now, but I mean, I really don't think that they were that great.
Well, it would be
was a little
beautiful,
concerned of
it'd be
that.
beautiful to replace them all.
Sure.
But as far as being, meeting, safety protocols and code and all of that, they do meet that. Although the newer ones obviously have the guide rails and they're the broad,
Absolutely. I just wonder even that rail that's on the side, if that could even be, it just seems, I mean, I'm sure they know what they're doing, I'm not saying that, but I mean, people were holding it and they were
yeah.
almost falling, and that was a little concerning to me when you were there not too long ago.
The reason why
Worried
they're
about
here
that.
is absolutely because we know that they need to be addressed. I think it's just the price tag. Do you spend 140 and not really get what you're wanting?
Oh, no,
long
I
term,
think we
you know,
need to
so-
wait on that. I was just wondering if that railing or something, maybe
Yeah.
it didn't seem very safe.
No.
Any other questions for Mike?
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you so much.
You did it on those.
All right. Now it's time for public comments. If you'd like to address the board, please stand, state your name if you'd like, your address for the recording secretary, and please try to keep your comment to 3 minutes or less.
Yes, I'm my name is Bob Hawcroft. My kids all went through Gaines and Switch Creek schools. Our baby is a senior in high school. My concern is over the piano. I overheard something at festival in the hallways on Friday night. Not being a musician myself, mostly in music appreciation, even what I heard startled me and I thought was too high. So I volunteered to call a personal family friend who is a musician, has been for well over 50 years. He's a household name amongst the music community in Genesee County. And he said, indeed. And subsequently he's had conversation with others that confirmed that as well. So I did some research. I have here stuff that probably belongs in a bid, which I'm glad to hear you're going to have. So I guess we'll forego that part of it, but I do want to know how to actively place a bid. And then more than that, although I don't do it now, I come from a very strong sales background. And I think all of us have been consumers of something or another. As Mr. Minkus so accurately pointed out, you can get sticker shock on instruments. You can be sold down the river on something. You can be given promises that, well, they're not much good beyond when the air cools as you leave the room. And I've been a part of that. So I'm very, very concerned, and I don't have anything in the game, no skin in the game. My daughter's been through the band program. The household name I mentioned would be known by Mr. Luke, certainly, Miss Murdoch, and others. But she'll be graduating. So mine is, as you know, community, public person. The better the instrument, the more it's going to show off the facility, the better it's going to draw a crowd, the more you'll be able to pay for ticket sales or command for ticket sales, different talent you may be able to draw, perhaps even on the name of the type of instrument you have, because certain facilities around the world are known for the instrument and voice that they have by the performers that play them or are accompanied by them. So I guess that being said, my concern is that we compare apples to apples and we don't just throw a bid out and we go on price. Because knowing what I know and coming from a very strong background in sales, I'm pretty sure I could do it just based on price. But I don't want to do that. I want to do it on the whole package, on value, what comes to the table, why it comes to the table, and I want to know that the person next to me with bid is not a felt hat and leather shoes. Bringing in something that's just price or empty promises or what have you. There's Timex and there's Rolex. They're both going to tell you the same time as that clock on the wall if they're set properly and running. But you do oftentimes get what you pay for. There is margin, there's markup, and other things to be considered. And so I guess I'd like to know how to go about that process the
Sure.
most successfully.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So I believe if, Mr. Pashek, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you'll be able to get that bid posted by tomorrow.
Yes, we're going to have some specifications related to the piano. We have a State of Michigan public website that we're for purchasing and bidding out processes like this. It'll be it's Buy for Michigan is the website. We're also going to put it in the newspaper as well. So, and we also will communicate to directly to vendors too, as far as who may be interested in soliciting a bid. So that's if everything goes as planned, we'll be putting a bid in on our website. It'll be in the newspaper, and typically it'll be open for basically 2 weeks for vendors to submit their bids.
Okay, and is there deviation from the process, or is there a ceiling height of X amount of dollars and then the district would have to make up the rest through a community fundraiser, buy a key, that type of thing?
Right, so that will be in the bid instructions. We'll put out the specifications and we'll, for example, say what we're looking for so that we are comparing apples to apples, so that anyone that would be submitting a bid is, if we say we're looking for a 9-foot grand, isn't submitting a 6-foot grand. So we'll have some parameters with that, and then part of the sealed bid is that you make your best offer in that bid, and then we go from there. And then there'll be a public time; those stay sealed. Right. There'll be a public time in a couple weeks, and it'll be posted and announced as well, where all of the bids get opened, and they get open in
You're welcome
public.
to attend that too. It'll be essentially 2 weeks out. We'll have a sealed bids, and we'll have available for anybody that's welcome to come in and see the process, to know that it's been a fair, transparent process. And just for that information alone, and then And then from there, we evaluate the bids and make a recommendation to the board. But the intention, we will get working with Jamaica, we'll be working very specific specifications that'll be outlined on the website, and we can also forward it to you directly to the future contact information.
And I think we have that right here.
Yeah.
You do.
Is that correct?
The email, phone
Yes,
number,
we
yes.
did.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming forward too.
Thank you,
Absolutely.
Mr. Hopper.
Appreciate
I
it.
look forward to it.
Anyone else?
Jim Thompson, 8196 Miller. And the gentleman speaks about Music Man and Professor Hill. And wasn't he about to sell a lot of music? You know the story? So that won't happen here, I know. And last Thursday night, the instrumental music department put on a fantastic festival. Our kids did well, and they presented themselves well. And the facility was admired by people from afar. So you can be proud of it. And we have a collective sense of pride here in this community. On Friday night, at the Cage, the daddies brought their daughters, and they danced from several of the elementary schools. We are proud. We have a collective sense of pride. And it goes on. So thank you so much for all you do. And the excitement about that piano, you are right. It is that's sign language for chatter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Anyone else? All right. Going on, we have employment items.
Yes, we have number 9 employment items under 9A for AFSCME employment. I'd like to recommend to the board to employ Angela Myers as a lead caregiver at the Child Development Center effective February 3rd, 2017. I'd like to recommend to the board for your approval.
Need a motion? Stacy?
Support.
Mike? Any comments or questions? Hearing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Schedule B.
Schedule B, employment to employ Travis Peruski as a middle school track coach for 2017-18 for the spring season, to employ Shannon Cumming as an assistant girls track coach for the 2017-18 spring season, and to employ Erin O'Brien as a JV girls tennis coach for the 2017-18 spring season. I'd like to present these 3 employment items under Schedule B for the board for you to vote on and approve.
I need a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Stacy, Tony, any comments or questions?
I do. Once again, our papers aren't complete, and that was brought up at our workshop, but there's several here that aren't complete. Some of them say, see page 2, and we have no page 2.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Next we have business items. Sean?
Thank you. Tonight, we have for under 10A, we have the mid-year budget amendment for the general fund for 2016-17. Currently, we're operating under the original budget adopted in June. This is a amendment, mid-year amendments that we do every fiscal year. We also have a final amendment for the 16-17 that will be correspond right along with the adoption of the 17-18 as we present the 17-18 budget. But right now it's the mid-year budget amendment for general fund. It's standard process. The primary revenue adjustment in this budget amendment is relates to the actual property tax values. When I adopt and present the original budget, they have estimated values at that point in time, and they get finalized and solidified, and so that there's all the local, all the tax dockets finalized, and they submit that data to the state, and I can retrieve the values. So the actual property tax values used, and I assessed there 18 mils for non-homestead operating. You'll see that in the summaries as they come up on the next couple slides. This also includes the actual student counts from the October student count. That's blended with the February count, so we finally get a final FTE count on our students. Changes in the actual state aid allocations, and that's referring to we get a final number, or well, it's a little bit of a moving target, but it gets closer to the final number for like items like at-risk funding, UAL, which is our that's the subsidy that the state essentially we receive that from our state aid, and it addresses the underfunding of the pension system. But we receive it from the state of Michigan, and we turn right around, and you'll see that on the expenditure side, that money goes right to the ORS, our retirement system. So that's part of the state aid allocation change, and then also we're adjusting for the actual grant entitlements. So we had some Title I carryover. We had for example, we had some smart board TVs that were purchased at DEEC. Well, those purchases, those items didn't get delivered by June 30th, so they kind of rolled over to July, and that naturally created a carryover of funds from our title grant. So what the state does, they just, knowing that, and we communicate with them, we just roll those funds over, and they get added to this year's allocation. So you'll see that that's one of the grant entitlements that changes, and I'll go into a little bit more here. Expenditure side, adjustments for steps and levels. What that is, we got all our staffing levels set. Everybody that's on the EA, whether that they're going from step 1 to step 2 or going from a master's to a master's plus 30, all those final changes are completed as they come into the school year. Adjustments in benefit enrollments, that's people going from cash in lieu to maybe having health insurance, or going from single to a married, or married to a full family. So all those things affect the benefit costs, and that applies across the district. And the next item, adjustment of grant expenditure budgets with the grant revenues, and that kind of goes with basically the last item on the revenue side, the grant entitlement. So if we get an extra $100,000 in grant revenue, I'm budgeting another $100,000 in expenditures. So they do go hand in hand, and that's one area that they don't really truly affect the bottom line, but it kind of either inflates the overall revenue expenditure, or inflates them as the entitlements change. And that same holds true for the UAL retirement funding. That I got about just under $100,000 increase on that. So the revenue side went up by $96,000, and the expenditures for retirement went up by equivalently to $96,000 for that specific change. But there's a lot other subtle changes throughout the budget. And then initial lineup. What I do at this point of the year, and that as we go through the year, we start looking at our line item adjustments. Like we've had a mild winter, so this year, in the past, I've not adjusted for utilities at this point, but here we are, and going into March, and we've had a mild winter. Hopefully, we don't have a late winter. So our utilities are heading in the good directions. Our fuel costs stayed at a nice low rate, so I've adjusted that down. And I've had those budgets established at some traditional historical levels, but thankfully we haven't had to use those. So being able to adjust those as they get throughout the school year. So flipping over to some of the line items and some of the variables that impact this amendment. We got, from left to right, this is the revenue summary. From left to right, we got the 14-15 and 15-16 audited actual in the first two columns, and then just for comparison purposes. And then we have the 16-17 original budget compared to this amendment that I'm presenting tonight. The first adjustment, the first item that to start off with is our student enrollment. You see it's been declining over the last few years, but it's also we budgeted 3810 coming into this original budget, but we've had a little bit more than we had originally anticipated, so our blended is at 3834. When you multiply that by the foundational allowance of 7511, it gives you the $180,000 additional state aid, for those extra 24 students. Property tax revenues, that's the next item. That's basically adjusting to the values that from the locals and assessing the 18 mills and just doing that calculation. And then I have a final, I essentially budget for 100% of the real property, but we also collect personal property, and I budget about 85% of that, because on real property, the county makes you whole, meaning whatever we anticipate receiving, we will get from the county. That does, we also get adjustments from prior years for uncollectibles that will come back into the expenditures, but just to give you an idea, that property tax adjustment, that's going with the real property values times our 18 mills for operation, and then a factor in there for personal property taxes too. Those are personal property taxes are volatile because the personal property sometimes tends to move from from location to location, but again, that didn't have a whole lot of impact at 32,000. State aid prior adjustment, we had some additional revenue there. At-risk funding went from original budget of 930 down to 918, just a little high on the original estimate. And then the special ed funding, about $81,000, and that's based on our final expenditure reports from the prior year. So that's went up about $81,000 in additional funding. Here's the MIPS or UAL that I was talking about, the $96,000. Equivalently, I bump up the benefits / retirement side of the expenditures by the $96,000. It's estimated about 11.7% in the current year of salaries. But that's truly an estimate. So that's what I base the expenditure side on too. So it comes up to about $96,000 on both the revenue and expenditure side. The adjustment, I should say. GSRP, no change mid-year. Title I, there's that $76,000 there. That's essentially the carryover. And really, it wasn't really, in our eyes, it really wasn't carryover. We had plans where we put out for bid and got the technology for DEEP, but it arrived in July, and then we have a solid cutoff for one fiscal year to the other, so it just rolls into this year. So that $76,000 is additional revenue on the Title I, but again, it's $76,000 on the expenditure side too. So there's really again, it's kind of inflating, it's increasing, it's part of that $600,000 increase in revenues, but yet it's, that item, the 96, it kind of inflates the whole changes overall in the district, but the bottom line is not impacted by those type of changes. And some other federal adjustments, the 44,000, and some other inter-district and other revenues, about 32,000. Again, I'll be adjusting these again at the end of the year for the final amendment, and as the athletic seasons come to an end, as there are just other factors that come into play. But on the expenditure side, again, just kind of going through the outline of the budget. There's a lot of changes as it looks, but really what it gets down to is we had, again, the UAL, the 96,000, the total increase is about 221,000. That's the net of all the ups and all the downs, but what's inflating that increase in that overall, like the UAL, the 96,000, the title of 75,000 is in there, and we also had some reduction in staff in the original budget, but coming into year we had some additional needs. I believe more in the special ed area, specific special ed. So we had some staff that we had to hire coming into the fall. So we had some about 2 or 3 additional staff members above what we anticipated in the original budget. But so, anyways, long story short, that those are factors that increase the overall expenditure. Some of the reductions, again, talking about the utilities, I have about a $65,000 reduction in our heating expense. I got about what was it? I think 70. I got a $75,000 in our transportation fuel, and the other thing that's in here, there's the line item of business, the $106,000. What I have in there is original. In the past, we've had adjustments for taxes from the county, so we get settled on the county for property taxes for the current year, but yet in that same process, we'll get billed for taxes they were unable to for adjustments, property tax values, and over the last from 2008 to 2012, there was some huge adjustments in values, and that line item in the budget was right around $1 million at one point during those years. Well, now it's last year we paid about $80,000, and so I had $200,000 on that line item, so I'm adjusted down by 120 down to a more what it's been the last couple of years. So that's a big part of that $106,000 reduction there. And those are some of the highlights of the changes in expenditures. Overall expenditures increased by $221,000. Again, we had to add a few more staff after our original budget was adopted, and the UAL grant expenditures and the grant expenditures really kind of bumped that up. But sometimes I looked at it as inflating the overall financial picture. Going back to the when I say inflate, like this UAL is really that $2.4 million. It's in our budget as revenue and expense, but it really was we're a money handling. We receive it on the 20th of the month, and we have to hand it back to the retirement system by the 30th of the month. So we're basically it's just the state's way of making sure they're trying to address the unfunded liability at the retirement system. So I mean that's part of the inflation factors of the budget. Here's just the summary sheet. I think everybody has a copy of. Basically, again showing the overall revenue budget at $36,994,000. Overall expenditures $37,244,000. And the improvement, the bottom line, net expenditures over revenue went from $629,000 down to $250,000. So that's an improvement of approximately $380,000 from original budget to amended, which would leave us about just under 6% fund equity as a percentage of expenditures. So that's definitely a move in a positive direction. And again, Mr. Ben's going to make a comment here when I'm done about there's still some room. I'm going to be looking as the year goes on. I mean, there's some areas in the utilities and transportation that just across the board. There's some line items that whether or not it's. Ben, I don't know if you want me to talk about the E-rate or that's.
Yeah, I can. Well, first of all, I appreciate that John has worked hard on this. One of the things that I look at, if you look at the revenue expenditures, the original budget had us in the red by $629,000, which obviously is an initial projection. So I've worked with Mr. Pichette on getting that number down to what I believe is going to be close to where we want to be. You'll see the number 250,000 there, and that's still into the red, but it keeps us at, not where we'd like to be, but it keeps us at, still just under 6% fund equity. But one of the things I want you to be aware of is that this $250,000 has about $200,000 of technology that has not yet been spent, and I think it's important that I explain the concept of what's called E-rate. So E-rate is a program, it's a grant program, and the way that it works is it's designed to offset technology costs for school districts. What happens is you have to put your initial capital outlay out there. So we have, let's just say, to make it a round number, $200,000 that we have set aside, And the specifics of that would be switches, network switches, different access points so that the wireless connectivity will be faster, more accessible, and up to handling the speeds that the internet will be, especially over the next 10 years. So we have $200,000 that we've put to get us kind of started down that road. And what happens is that E-rate reimburses you for a percentage of that. And oftentimes it's even up to 60 to 80% of whatever it is you spend. But you have to put that initial capital outlay out there. So they don't reimburse you the money until the following year. So if you can imagine it like this, at some point there's going to have to be an investment to tap into that those funds. So if we have that $200,000 that we spend this year, next year, right, our budget is to the good by $200,000 additional, if that makes sense, or $150,000, whatever the reimbursement is. We get that reimbursement, and then every year thereafter, our budgets can be right-sized because we're going to be in the E-rate program. So this is something that is very common amongst schools in Michigan. Because we're not in E-rate yet, and we have our application in, and we'll find out in the next few weeks whether we're approved. If we're approved, it makes sense for us to spend the money because next year we will be reimbursed those costs, and so we can show you what that looks like if you have questions. But that $250,000 there includes a couple $100,000 that is technology related to E-rate that we'll get most of that reimbursed in our next fiscal year. So that's just kind of an FYI on that.
And that, address that, some of the things that I'll look at in the final adjustment, E-rate is one of them, and that, depending on whether or not we're waiting on those approvals, like a lot of districts have gotten their approval. I know Ben and Travis have been inquiring about our application. We have a consultant that's monitoring the application process. As soon as that's approved, we're ready to go. Travis is ready to go. That's all. He's got a specific, the plan they submitted for the E-rate. You submit a plan, and they just got to get approved. So that, again, that may or may not utilize that $200,000 that is sitting on the budget. Again, I'll look at the final adjustment. We're looking at the purchase services and supplies across basically district-wide, transportation, fuel, and utilities. I adjusted those down. There's potential. I still have some positive variance, meaning not utilizing all the expenditure line in those couple areas there, and then just generally overall looking at the revenues and expenditures of all areas in the general fund budget. So that concludes the update on the general fund budget.
I just have a question.
Yeah.
Under the revenue slide, 31A at risk.
Yeah.
Can you remind me of what the difference is between the 14-15 year and what we're projecting? Is it the mix of students?
Yeah, it's a mix of students, but the state is also they've made additional allocations in that area towards that funding. So I see a little bit of a trend. You can see, a lot of times, like you notice the foundation allowance it's increased, but not very slowly. But they're tending, and even for 17-18, they're proposing, the governor's proposal is to bump that up by, I forget the dollar amount, but that's projected to go up. And they're using a lot of more of a categorical approach to some of the funding from the state. It's additional revenues to the districts, but it's also, we have to make sure we spend it appropriately. So it's I've seen that kind of a trend. Really, like we had some the UAL, we had some the technology, we had a couple other couple other categoricals that we through the years, and it's some years are really strong on the categoricals, and some years they've been more of a general tone to the budget. But that to address your question, the 31A, the state has been increasing that allocation to districts over time. It seems to be an emphasis in that area, so that's more about the state funding than
to piggyback on that, the politics of it. So the big picture politics of it is, if you're in Lansing and you're a legislator, you can point to a particular type of cause that you have increased the categorical funding to. So their tendency, the trend that we're seeing in Lansing is that they're willing to say, well, look, I increased at-risk funding for students without increasing the foundation allowance. And so there's obviously much debate about that and why that's not good or good, and different people have different opinions on that. But the fact of the matter remains that, as Mr. Pichette said, we're seeing an increase in at-risk technology, title, all of the different funds that we have are being allocated with strings attached more so than ever before.
Yeah, and thankfully those are funded. We do have some unfunded mandates too that are we still have to comply with too. So, but yeah, there's definitely a lot of compliance and reporting that goes along with, especially the Title I and more so with the at-risk funding. So they're providing more funding, but there's also more reporting that goes with it. So we'll make sure, and you know, there's definitely a need in those areas. So it's addressing a need, but it's you know, we just gotta make sure we comply with the regulations that go along with those funding. When it's foundation allowance and based on 7511, that's general managed funding for a district. So whether we focus on one curriculum or another, that's more of a district. But when you talk categorical, it's just more specifically to a certain group of students. So, but that's been one thing that we've seen over the last couple of years.
Thank you. Any other questions for John? Thank you, John, very, very much. All right. Let Mr. Pichette get back to his. Oh, you're good. You're good. I don't think we're going anywhere.
Keep it moving.
Okay. Next we have payment of bills.
Yes, under 10B, payment of bills for general fund, presented for your review and approval tonight. General fund payments of check number 260834 through 260997 in a total amount of $472,492.67. These payment of bills presented for your review and approval this evening.
Need a motion?
Move.
Mike?
Support.
Tony? Be it resolved, the Swartz Creek Community Schools Board of Education approved business item 10B as presented. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay, C?
10C is payment of bills for building a site. Payment of bills, check number 11234 through check number 11234 totaling $6,380 paid from the building a site fund. These payment of bills are presented for your review and approval this evening.
Need a motion? So moved. Stacy?
Support.
Tony? Any comments or questions? Be it resolved that the Swartz Creek Community Schools Board of Education approve business item 10C as presented. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? D.
Payment of bills for Child Development Center. Paid computer checks 6854 through 6856 in a total amount of $854.75. The payment of bills are presented for your review and approval this evening.
Need a motion?
So moved.
Mike? Support. Stacy? Any comments or questions? Be it resolved, the Swartz Creek Community Schools Board of Education approved business item 10D as presented. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I think the next three, John, are for discussion.
Yes, the next group, starting with the general fund, check number 260998 through 261239 in a total amount of $569,558.44 paid from the general fund account. The payment of bills are presented for your review and discussion this evening.
Any questions for John? Okay, John.
Item 10F, payment of bills, building and site, checks number 11235 through check 11237 in a total amount of $14,739.90 paid from the building and site fund. The payment of bills are presented for your review and discussion this evening.
Any questions for John?
And 10G, payment of bills of Child Development Center, checks 6857 through 6859 in a total amount of $1,431.82 paid from the Child Development Center account. The payment of bills are presented for review and discussion this evening.
Any questions for John? Okay, thank you, John, very much. Next, we have instruction items.
Well, I'm excited to have Mrs. Jody Morgan with us for our winter data review. In January, we spent the month collecting all of our winter data at all the buildings. In February, we spent the month holding building and district-wide data meetings, going over that data and making adjustments to our MTSS systems. And Ms. Morgan has an update on all of those final numbers and what it looks like for mid-year review.
Good evening, guys. Rod's handing you the district report card, which you've seen a couple of different times, and I'm also going to hand out to you 2 individual pieces. Just take one of each of these, and then I'll explain this update that wasn't a part of the original report card. So just as a quick reminder for you regarding the types of data that we are collecting, there's 3 main types. We collect what we call capacity data, which is kind of a whole district perspective, looking at all of our systems to ensure sustainability of what we're doing through our multi-tiered systems of support so that we can help our students from the ones who struggle the most to the ones that are excelling at the highest level. We collect fidelity data, which basically is at a building level, and we're looking to ensure that we are doing what we said we were going to do. It's not just a matter of we think we are, but we're ensuring it because we're looking at it and we're collecting data on it. And then the third piece, which is in the report card, is the outcome data. This is looking at individual students, whether we're looking at them at a building level, at a grade level, or individually as students. And then are we seeing growth in light of the efforts that we're putting into all of these things? So starting with capacity data, one of the things that we do with our district MTSS team is we complete a survey where we rank ourselves as a district based on 3 categories. We look at leadership, organizational environment, and competency. And there are about 6 to 14 indicators for each of those 3 categories that we kind of rank ourselves in a rubric form. 0 points if we're not doing it at all the way to 2 points if we are doing it well. In June of 2016, when we did that evaluation with our district MTSS team, we acquired about 57% of the possible points that we could get. So we knew right away that there were areas where we needed to grow in our ability to make our systems sustainable. So we've been working really hard through the fall with our individualized teams, and in December we did that same competency test again, and we scored 79%. So huge growth in some of the things that we're doing. Some of it is just systematizing things. Rod often says, as his joke, when one of us gets hit by a bus, it's the assurance that it's going to continue, that we're not people dependent, but that we're actually a system that can maintain moving forward.
Or wins the lottery.
Yeah, whatever it is. So it's exciting to see the growth to go from 57% to 79%. Fidelity data, every single building is doing what's called a tiered fidelity assessment. They're looking at their individual systems, tier 1, tier 2, tier 1 being what we do for all students, tier 2 what we do for smaller group, and then tier 3 what we do more individualized for students. And we do this 3 to 4 times a year, just kind of depends. This year it's 3 times per year. The goal is to get 70%, the benchmark is 70%. So back in October, when we did this the first time, 4 out of 8 of our buildings, and I say 8 because it's the 5 elementaries, the middle school, high school, and then our academy is part of that as well. So 50% of our buildings, 4 out of the 8, were able to get to that 70% benchmark. So we've been working with those individualized teams. We just had our last building finish it on Monday, and I am proud to announce that all 8 of our buildings met that 70% threshold for tier 1 specifically, which is really what we're working hard at because we know that foundation has to be laid. Otherwise, we will exhaust our systems and our resources otherwise. So then that brings us to the outcome data, which is what is in front of you. A couple of things to note that is different from what you saw in the fall when I met with you guys.
On the very first page of the larger report card, the state percentile ranks have been added. One thing that I'm going to note regarding the state percentile ranks, so last year, the state didn't even calculate percentile ranks for schools whatsoever, so that's why there's an NA, I believe, in that category. This year, it came out, and you'll see an increase in some of our buildings. Specifically, I think the high school is one of them. But one of the things that I'm going to note in that, or that you need to make note of, is the state used kind of a different calculation, if you will, of how they came up with percentile ranks. So we've always had this component. There's like several components that make up their analysis of that. And one of those components is comparing our top 30% of our students versus the bottom 30% of our students and looking at what the variance is between those. That component was left out this year. So moving forward, when that is recalculated back in, could have some fluctuation on our data. So I just want you to know that as you're looking at that and kind of tuck that way in the back of your head. You will see also what wasn't there in the fall is all of the demographic data for STAR. So you have STAR Reading and STAR Math near the back, all the demographic data. So whether we're looking at male versus female, all of our race and ethnicity groups are in there, school of choice versus resident students, that is all in there this time. And just kind of another piece that I want to throw in there that is kind of exciting. For the first time, and so I've been with the district 18 years, we've been doing DIBELS for a little over 12. For the first time, tonight you have in your hands demographic data on DIBELS. So those two extra sheets that I gave to you are the demographic data straight out of our reading program, our reading assessment that we've been doing at the elementary level. So it doesn't include school of choice and resident, but all of the other data is there. And I gave you two sheets specific for a couple of different reasons. One, if you look up in the upper left-hand corner, it'll say DIBELS, and underneath it'll say K5, and then another one will say 2-5. So I gave you K5 because we do give it from our kindergarten through our 5th grade so that you can look at a comprehensive view. But if you wanted to compare, let's say, this demographic data to STAR, I gave you the 2-5 because STAR reading is only given 2nd through 5th grade. So you can have something that's a little bit more comprehensive to look at in that respect. So that's what you have there. It's kind of exciting to see this data come out for the first time in that number of years. The last couple of things I'll mention that we've been doing with our data this fall and heading into the spring is we're really taking a comprehensive look at our behavior data. So we have a new system that we're using at the secondary level. It's called Early Warning Indicators. So we're looking at 4 main areas. We're looking at attendance. We're looking at actual behaviors, specifically suspensions from school, whether that's in-school suspension or out-of-school suspension. And then we're looking at students' grades in both math and ELA. And they become like 4 flags, essentially. So as we look at all of our students, those 4 indicators, the more flags you raise, so if you are over the attendance threshold of 10%, if you're failing your English class, if you're failing your math class, if you've had a suspension from school, those put you kind of at the top of the list, and they become early indicators for us to say these are students that maybe could potentially get missed or lost in the shuffle because they don't show up somewhere else, if you will. But it allows us kind of to get a quick look at where we are with some of our students, and we have the top 11 students that we're looking at to say, okay, this is what we need to do something different for these because they have the most indicators or most areas of need or awareness for us. So that's the first time that we've had that quick look at those things for our students this year. And it's exciting to see that moving forward, that we'll be able to kind of catch some of these kids maybe earlier, and that way we can have fewer at risk of failure is really what we would like to see. And then other than that, we're really taking a quick look and a deeper look at our behavior data. We use the system called SWIS. So we're looking at the number of days, again, the suspensions that students are spending out of school, trying to monitor that closely, identify like Rod was saying, you know, are there other practices that we need to put into place because we do want our kids here at school? So how can we, you know, navigate through some of those waters and make this a place where students want to be, not avoiding it, you know, at all costs. And so we're talking and having those deep, courageous conversations about our behavior data and what we're doing with students here at school. Any questions you guys have? That's a quick lay of the land where we are right now.
On these two, what's the F and the W?
Fall and winter, right?
Fall and winter, yep.
Okay. And what's it tell you?
What does it tell me?
Sure.
So I can tell you what the comparison tells me. The comparison tells me that between Dibbles and Star, there's not a statistically different. We're basically the percentage of students that are at benchmark on one, they're at benchmark on the other. So we're seeing growth, and now it's just fine tuning our practices.
You're seeing growth from where they walked into the building in the fall.
In most cases, yes. There are areas certainly where we already know or we've already identified where we need to grow. One of the things, for instance, I'll tell you, our phonetic program at the early literacy level, because we are looking at that, you know, everybody needs to be reading at benchmark by the end of 3rd grade. So we're really looking hard at our, what are we doing with like a basic phonetic instruction across all 5 elementaries, because we're all kind of doing something, but it's not necessarily equitable. So I couldn't tell you that what one student's getting at this school is the same as the student over here. So we're having a courageous conversation about how do we create equity for our students. So that's one piece that I can tell you specifically that's come out of these discussions.
Jody, when you look at this data, the 2 sheets, just as an example, what is it that excites you the most and what is it that concerns you the most?
The thing that excites me the most is that we are seeing a general trend upward once the students are here and if they're with us for any length of time. What concerns me the most is that students are coming to us with less and less every single year, so the work is greater and greater, which requires a lot of resources in order to make sure that we get students to the level that we want them to be at. And it also concerns me because with the high transient rate, students that come into, say, our middle school, 2, 3, 4, 5 years behind in some cases, we can do great, amazing things, but it doesn't even begin to prepare them adequately for moving on to the high school, and we need to move them on to the high school, some of them just because of their age. And so that puts them at a significant deficiency or behind in the ability to keep up at the high school level. And that concerns me because even though we're doing great things at the high school and making great strides in some of the things that we're doing, sometimes it just doesn't feel like enough to address some of the needs that we have.
Are there best practices out there that would say we could do something differently or add in, I'm just going to say something crazy, like an after-school program that kids might find to be fun but also educational? Are those types of things going on to fill some of these gaps where kids are significantly behind?
There are some things going on. It's probably an area where we could grow. I will be honest with you, one of the things that we've come up against is the need to look at transportation. Because some of the students that have the greatest need still need to ride the bus home because there's nobody that's going to be able to come and pick them up at 3:30, let's say, at the secondary level because mom or dad are working till 5, 6 o'clock at night. So we have to look strategically at some of the funding, you know, when it comes to transportation so that we can afford that to some of our students who need to have that provided to them. The other thing too is that I think we just have to take a deeper look across all systems to make sure that what we're doing, although it may be great things, is it the best thing to be doing? And is it serving, one of the things we talk about is it effectively serving us in what we want to do? Not that it's a bad thing, but it might not be giving us what we really want. So we may have to do some strategic abandonment of some of the things we're doing in order to do something that may be more advantageous and get us the results that we really want. And I'm not putting any one thing out there. I think we're looking at all of our systems to make sure that we're doing what's in the best interest of students.
One of the things that Dave Simonson, I don't know if you remember, we talked about the Brick House a couple of years ago, where they were trying to, capture all kids who were behind in work or who weren't at grade level. And the resources at the middle school, I mean, there's just not enough to capture that whole building for everyone who's behind. He tried running it at lunch with a little bit of help, and it's too massive of an endeavor to find both everyone who is behind in work as well as in achievement. So we've talked about some things about, what could we ever get some intervention period in there, structure the day differently. We're just not there yet.
Mike, you had a question?
The goal target being 80,
Mm-hmm.
is that state mandated or is that our goal?
That is best practice.
Pardon? Best
That is
practice?
the best practice. That you want 80% of your students meeting benchmark, because then what you're doing at a foundational level is working for the largest majority of your students. So that is best practice.
So if you have 80% meeting your benchmark or your tier 1, you're only having to put your resources for tier 2 and tier 3 into the other 20%, in theory. 80% is a very high mark. We have pockets where a grade level will hit it, or a building will hit it, or
a group of students.
Or a group
we
of
have
students
a
will
group of
hit
students
it.
that are doing it, and we follow that group of students all the way through. And second grade, they're 80, or they're close all the way through. But then the next group that comes in might be needier. So.
Well, let's say, like in math class, maybe there's a couple students that are behind. Does that teacher themselves maybe try to contact the parents and have them maybe work something out to stay over a couple days a week to help them move ahead too as well, instead of
We have
you
that
having to worry
going
about
on
the
in
bus
pockets.
things or-
There are teachers that are doing things. I've had teachers flip their classrooms all upside down and do things entirely different. The math support classes at both middle school and high school, where it's the reteaching that goes on, as well as the pre-teaching and catching up. That's
So
going
we have
on.
5 math support classes at the middle school and 5 reading support classes, or 5 hours each.
There's 4 at the high school.
Right. So we have pockets, but again, that's a tier 2, tier 3 intervention. That's the kid who just isn't meeting benchmark at all. But then tier 1 is, we still need to make sure, so at the middle school all 900 are getting there, at the high school all 1200. And so you really also need to make sure, and when you go through the grant, like the Mike Lissy grant, the focus is, what are you doing in tier 1? Because if your tier 1 is solid, and you have all the resources and the instructional practices, which is a whole other conversation, you're gonna see hitting 80% more, so that you can then allocate the resources to the 20% who really need it.
Now, what about, like they would do, I think I mentioned before, at the elementary, like, McKenna would go maybe and help in a room. Do they have students that do
We have
that, or
that
is
at the
that
high
not?
school level.
Okay.
Mhm.
Middle
Tier
school level
tutors.
though, or not as much?
It's
or?
not as much, but I think because the schedule is so tight that it doesn't afford for that, whereas high school students receive credit for being peer tutors in that way, and so it just lends itself more
Maybe that,
naturally to
is
that.
there a way that can be adjusted, like in the future, where there's more room maybe at the middle school? That,
I think
we're not so much
anything's
sure.
up for discussion.
I just wondered.
We used to have the team teaching at the middle school, and I know at certain times, I don't remember if it was just before report cards came out or what, but the teachers on each team would take a day and sit down and take the students that didn't have work done, and they would, it was whatever that group was, and they would focus on the work that needed to be turned in.
Oh, really?
And I know we don't do that because it had to do with,
Budgets.
exactly,
Most team teaching across middle schools across the country evaporated.
right. But is there anything as far as those kind of days that we could work in?
We've been trying to be creative with that. So what Mr. Simonson was doing at lunchtime, we've tried to do some of that. We do have a couple of what we call guided academics classes at the middle school level. students that are, I'll call them our frequent flyers, who they're probably more than capable of obtaining the grade, but not necessarily putting in the effort, find themselves in these classes where it's kind of somebody there to help teach them what their skills are, how to time manage, how to organize, those types of things. So those classes are going on. Often the times the students find themselves, maybe assigned to that class, and then they can work their way out of that class. And then there's just creative things that go on amongst teachers in general. I mean, we also have Catch-Up Cafe at the high school, where that can go on at lunchtime and students can go in and, have time to study or to catch up on work if they're behind, those types of things. But like a full day in a format like that, there really isn't that opportunity, I guess.
Do we have anything as a positive to give to the students so that they don't get into that? I mean, other than the grade, you should just be doing it for yourself anyway, but for those students that are capable but aren't, do we have an incentive that would...
So I'll tell you something exciting, for me at least, at the middle school level, is the citizen, so the doing homework isn't necessarily a part of the grade. It's considered part of your citizenship because you were responsible, those types of things. So students who got all 3s for citizenship grades at each marking period, those students had a special time. This last week actually was one of those times where the students were able to come down. So at each grade level we had an hour for 8th grade, 7th grade, and 6th grade. And those students who met that criteria came to the media center and they played board games and they played Pie Face, and I mean they had a blast. It was noisy, and my office is right off the media center, but I went out and Jenny Sheeran and the counselors are the ones there that ran that, and she goes, "I'm so sorry, Jody." I'm like, "No, because we haven't had this in years. This is exciting to me." The kids, no cell phones were out. They were chatting, eating popcorn, and playing Pie Face, and they thought that was the greatest thing in the world. So that's one of the positive things that we're doing, is those happen, on a quarterly level.
Was that the first time for that one?
For that particular one, they've done something different every single time.
We were laughing because McKenna's teacher accidentally put that she didn't hand her packet, and she did, so. She's like, "I would give her another party like that, but I'll buy her lunch." I was laughing. She didn't get to go, and she was supposed to, but yeah.
But yeah,
she
it's
said,
exciting.
They said it was so fun.
The kids were totally engaged with one another and talking, and I mean that's really a lot of our efforts that we've been doing have lended themselves in that direction. I think ultimately, that whole homework piece is a conversation piece that we continue to have at the secondary level. Part of that is just the practice that needs to occur, for the other things that go on in class, and we're finding kind of a growing trend or disenchantment on the part of the students of engaging in the need for that practice. So teachers are having to be creative and in their approaches.
I think your counselors are amazing too. I mean, because they're doing these extra things. They're even picking the kids out to do fun things with microphones, at the lunch time, and just fun things. And
we've had cash draws.
If they've gotten the citizenship award or they've gotten something special, or so it makes them excited to want to do that too. Anyway.
So there's a big cultural shift as we move into this new instructional framework, which we're going to be talking about. But there's a lot of, I guess, the traditional ways that we all went to school, right? That when we were in school, you had homework and you sat and you listened and you got, an assignment, you went and you did it, and you turned it in. And when I was a principal at a middle school, and middle schoolers are a lot of fun, but I went up in lunch one time and there was a group of kids and they got up really quickly and they were really embarrassed and nervous about what I was going to say. And what they had done is they had come up with a homework club at lunch where each day they assigned themselves to do the homework and then they'd sit at lunch and copy it. And I thought that was just really resourceful. But the reality was homework is very oftentimes that, or mom or dad does it, or I'm doing it on the bus before I get to school. And one of the other problems with homework that we see as a consistent trend is the worst thing that a child can do is practice something incorrectly. Because once they practice incorrectly, they now have to relearn something which is actually 10 times harder than learning it the right way in the first place. So homework has a place, particularly for drilling and in doing some of the drill and skill work. It certainly has a place. but we have to move our culture, and this goes for parents, administrators, teachers, students. It's less about doing work and it's more about what you're learning through the process, and shifting the focus from compliance of I turned this in and I got it done, because just simply doing something isn't necessarily mean that you're learning the content. And we also have to be careful that we're not actually harming students by giving them work to practice at home that they haven't even been taught how to do correctly in the first place. So there's just a kind of a culture shift that goes along with some of that that is different as students are changing. So
I have a couple questions on this page, and I'm going to the district-wide K-5. And I'm just going to go to the district one because it kind of includes everybody. I understand we're trying to get to a benchmark of 80, correct? But what would someone, or what would you guys call reasonable growth? I mean, some of them there's no growth, and then some of them there's low growth, and then I think the best on there is 4. No, I apologize. No, 9. I mean, that's within a very small subculture or group. So if we just go to male and female, we went from 66 to 65, or 61 to 65. We went from 66 to 67. What was the expectation out of the staff, or out of you and Rod?
So the expectation is always growth. I don't necessarily put a 2% or things like that. One thing I think you have to remember with this test is that at some points in time, especially in the early grades, what the components are of the test change a little bit. So there might be 3 different types of tests one time in let's say in the fall, and then we add a new component in at the winter time and drop something off. So there's always a few fluctuations that happen with these scores. And it could be that those students have never seen that test or never taken that particular piece of that test previous to that. So I always gauge these just kind of in general terms to look and see if we're generally growing. I don't necessarily say I want to see 5% or those types of things, because I know those intricacies on the backside. At a building level, I think you can dig in a little bit more and look at a grade level and say if you have a general trend in a grade level, then what are we doing to combat, let's say 2nd grade for instance, because that's one where there's a new test that's introduced. So what are we doing to prepare the students for that new test prior to them actually seeing that for the first time? Does that make sense?
No, because if that's the case, I don't know why we're comparing winter to fall. Because if we're not doing the same test, we really don't know what that number even means.
Well, the tests increase about what the child is learning at the elementary. So you may be learning phonemes in 1st grade, but you already know how to read in 5th grade. So every year you're tracking towards comprehension and understanding, so the tests have to adapt because the kids are at a whole different learning level.
No, I understand that.
Right, but I think one thing to note is that the composite score that these are made up from weights those different tests differently. So if it's a new test that's introduced, it's not weighted as heavily as maybe one that they've had for a few times. But it allows us to see when we introduce that next phase of learning in, where the students, are they keeping up at the rate they should be keeping up at.
And it's also Dibbles and STAR, just so how we use it as an MTS team. They're screeners. They're like the benchmark. A building level team's going to take that to start the conversation of a data meeting to do what's next for instruction. So unlike, say, a state test, which is measuring all of your achievement, or some sort of national standardized test, this is meant as what does your system look like? So what we try to do at a district level is, what is the big picture for the district? What's the big picture for the building? And then at a building level, they're actually using the data to change instruction, and that's kind of what a screener does. So do you want to see growth? Absolutely. But what this does is it ends up being in front of teachers in a meeting that are making instructional decisions like who needs help with phonetics, in what group should they be in, who needs help with phonemes, who needs some comprehension, where are the gaps in those individual learning, and what are we going to do about it?
Okay, then I'll rephrase my question, because you're basically not doing apples and apples. So district-wide, the males went from 61 to 65, and the females went from 66 to 67. So what are you doing different?
That's a question we have to continue to ask. Because it depends, I think it depends on grade levels. I mean, that's where when we dig in at a building level, you look at the different grade levels. We look at different makeup within classes. We could look at different.
So then just pick a grade, pick a building, and pick a building and pick a grade level. What second grade at Deke? Whatever the test score showed you there. What are we doing different at Deke in second grade? From the fall to the winter data. What did it tell us, and what are we changing?
I don't know that I could answer that. I think a building principal would have to answer that for you, because I'm not in the classroom to observe on a daily basis, you know, this versus that, or maybe this percentage of students came in lower because they were brand new to our district versus
What's
another
being changed
percentage.
within the MTSS system at, say, second grade Deke, you have your fall winter meetings and you set up your processes for intervention, is now in the winter you have new data and you have some kids that have met it and some kids who haven't, and so you're changing the intervention. So what's different is their half hour of intervention is a totally different set of instruction that they didn't receive in the first 8 to 12 weeks. So they're literally changing their intervention groups 3 to 4 times a year, every year.
So Dibbles as a screener, correct me if I'm wrong, is slightly different than STAR. STAR is more standardized, is that correct?
STAR is, and STAR is also computer adaptive. So Dibbles is given one-on-one student to adult, whereas STAR is given online and they're in front of the computer the whole time.
So when you're dealing with apples to apples, then if you were looking at, say, this district performance card that had STAR math on it, what you'd be looking at is you're seeing fall of 15, winter of 16, spring of 16, and so what you would want to know or see then is within that group, so fall of 15, winter 16, spring 16, I'd want to see growth, because that was going to be a consistent test that we're looking at. So that would be that apples to apples kind of comparison if you were trying to look at it through that lens.
And Dibbles at a grade level too would be a little bit more consistent, because the students the expectation is the same for a whole grade level moving at a time, if that makes sense.
Well, and I'm not giving you a hard time yet, I am. But my question is you gave me this piece of paper, and basically it means nothing to me. Because, hang on, because if I don't understand how each building, each grade level, and each group of teachers have redesigned what those children are seeing, this is just a number. I mean, if I look at this number as just a lay person, I see the females went from 66 to 67. You went up a point, but did we guess better? Did we guess worse? I'm looking at this number.
Sure.
So, I mean, district-wide, I mean, to me, I don't know, I mean, I don't ever want to see the number go down. But going up 1 point after 3 months, 4 months of school, I wouldn't call that an overwhelming success.
And that maybe those are the kinds of conversations that we're having at a building level that drives the instruction that we do, whether it be in our whole classrooms or whether it be within individualized groups of students, like Rod was saying.
Right, and I think that's what maybe needs to be explained better to us as a board, because I don't think anybody can look at these numbers and understand that Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so sat down with her group of second grade teachers and said, hey, look, this is what we got, this is what we're going to do, we're going to, you know, not that I want them to come here and explain that, but that would at least offer an explanation of what took place in that grade, in that building, because, I mean, when I look at this number, I have no idea. I mean, it's borderline, it's even more meaningless than when I started looking at it. Because, I mean, you've just enlightened me that this is what the staff is doing and this is what they're doing to correct or maybe try to raise everybody's score on individual children or maybe a small group of children. So this number really is almost meaningless, correct?
No, I think it gives us an idea of where we are generally speaking with our students. So generally, when we look at all of our females, what percent of them are meeting the benchmark for, regardless of whether they're kindergarten or whether they're 5th grade, meeting the benchmark for their grade level? How are we doing in a general sense with our individual groups of students? And I think when you get into some of those groups, like let's say the ELL group, which is the English language learners, some of them, for instance, came to us not knowing a lick of English. So to see it go from 0 to 50, that tells me they've acquired a whole lot to even be able to get to that. And that might be a very small percent of students too, because we might be talking in some instances only 1 student per building or 2 students per building. You know, and so that's what will create some of that fluctuation as well.
So this really gives us a snapshot of our kids as a whole group, what percentage of them are meeting the benchmark. If we wanted to take a look at, I think what you're possibly asking for, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think what you're looking for is the actual score breakdown, which would be different than this data, because a number of these kids that met the benchmark, so when you talk about, well, they went from 66 to 67, that just meant that 1 more percentage of our students are meeting that benchmark. But it could be that in that 67%, a lot of those kids increased by a lot. And so you would see something different if we gave you score breakdowns. So I think that's maybe just a different chart that we might prepare for our next one, that could look at some data more than just the high level, so we could see some trends and whether growth or not growth.
Well, and the other thing to remember is that this is the first time with this particular data that we've seen anything demographic-wise. I mean, the Dibbles data that's in your thing on a general per view of, district-wide and at each of the grade levels, that's all the data we've ever had up to this point in time. So to even dig down this deep, it's exciting to be at this level. And now you're right, we do need to ask more questions. And we're just now getting to the point where we can ask some of those questions and even be able to compare the 2 tests that we give to one another and say, is one yielding better results than another one, or giving us the data that we really want versus the other one, if that makes it sense.
If you go to Star Reading, if you compare fall of 15 to fall of 16, every one of those has gone up. Doesn't that indicate that we're doing something right? Although we don't know what it is they're doing. Doesn't that indicate that they're making an adjustment?
And if you look specifically of fall of 15 to fall of 16, well, fall of 15 to spring of 16, those are most consistent to one another because we were at the 50th percentile at the time. Remember at the beginning of this year we changed to the 35th percentile because it was more in line with what standardized tests are when we talk about an average range. So it's really a little bit difficult for us to say fall of 15 to fall of 16, how equitable those are, because we changed the percentile of our benchmark.
But to what Mr. Ahern's saying is that fall of 15 to spring of 16 should be, you're looking at
growth.
those 3, right?
And even if you look at fall of 16 to winter of 17 and the growth pattern that you see within that, there's still growth within that.
And everyone in the spring, everyone is a plus, right?
So what did you just say? If we look at the fall of 15, if we take the 2nd grade in the fall of 15, I'm looking at 34.
Right. So
and then when I go to the fall of 16 and I go to 3rd grade, which would be those 2nd graders, correct?
Correct.
And there's 61. What did you just say was the difference there?
When they were when they were 2nd graders in the fall of 15, our district benchmark was the 50th percentile. So we expected them. So percentiles, just as a reminder, when we take a standardized test, 50th percentile is dead set in the center of average, and 25 to 75 is the average range. So what we were saying is we expected 80% of our kids to be at or above the 50th percentile, which on a bell curve isn't even statistically possible. because you're gonna have 25%, you know, within the average range on either side. So we changed our benchmark to the 35th percentile, so while it feels like we lowered it, we actually we're looking at where are we really within a national curve, if that makes sense, when you're talking about a standardized test.
So the fall of 15, we were at 50%,
Correct.
and in the fall of 16, we were at what?
35th, which is still a standard and a half deviation above the lowest part of average.
Would you get the job, please?
But even within that, if you look at where those students were at the beginning of the year to where they were at the end of the year, there was a significant amount of growth. And then where they are now, even using the different benchmark, they still went from 61% meeting benchmark to 68% of meeting benchmark.
I think that's all I was gonna say is even me being in the classroom, like I get that, you know what I mean? Because at Moorish, I would be helping or we get it. So even if somebody came that gives them these tests and even explained it further, it might be a little more helpful to
I can
understand,
always
like
give you the test
hands-on.
like I did once before.
That's what you did. It was so fun. No, it was so fun.
No, and if you want to overview
Hands-on
that
is
stuff, you know,
just
we've been
easy.
doing RTI for 8-9 years, and I think when we first started, we did a lot of what does a data medium look like, what do groups look like. We have a list of interventions we use at all the levels. So, I mean, if you're, I could bring that to academic achievement, or we could bring it to the full board. But
I mean, I get it, but
you
that
could
might
dive
help
into
you to
any part
understand a
of
little
our
more, you know?
system. Our system is wide and deep in Swartz Creek.
Well, and it's
Yeah.
so intricate. So I mean, behind that single page that you have, I have 6 pages of data broken down all different ways. You know, whether it's at a teacher level, to a grade level, to an individual building level, comparing STAR to DIBELS. I mean, there's a lot behind that. And then, I mean, we could even go down deeper and say, okay, the individual pieces. I mean, one of the things I sent Rod, so John Hattie's been brought up before to you guys. I know you've heard that before. And he says, know your effect. So I've even been going so far as to say, okay, here's the core test that every kindergartner or first grader in individual buildings all the way up through. And I've been going building by building saying, okay, here's their here's their fall score, here's their winter score, what was the effect size, which is what John Hattie says, and there's a statistical formula behind all of that. And we could go through every single student by student or by building and say, here's the effect size on this individualized test specifically. So, I mean, there's lots of ways to do it. I mean, but then we could be here all night just looking at numbers. And the reality is, what are we doing for kids? Are we looking at them, identifying their needs, addressing those needs, and is it having an impact on them in the end? And that's really where we want to continue our work, because we are seeing the growth in students, and we are addressing those.
Jody, thank you so much. It's apparent how much you care about our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. And as always, if you have questions when you leave, don't hesitate to get a hold of me.
Thanks.
Thank you.
French trip.
So next is 11B, and as we have brought the French trip to you, just asking that that be approved as presented.
Okay, motion. So moved. Stacy?
Support.
Tony, any comments or questions?
I just have one question. Is there a minimum number of students that have to go on these trips?
I think it depended on how many chaperones they got, because they needed X per group, you know, and so they have to have enough chaperones to cover all the kids, but I'm not sure if there's a bare minimum like 10, but I can find out.
No, it was a 6-to-1 ratio.
6-to-1 ratio.
For the student. Any other questions? Hearing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
And
Spanish.
so 11C is the Spanish trip that has been brought before you, and this again tonight is just for your approval as presented.
Need a motion?
So moved.
Mike? Support. Stacy, any comments or questions? Hearing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Third year academic awards.
And so before you, you have students who for 3 years in a row have achieved a 3.6 grade point average, and it is just a resolution honoring and recognizing those students.
And we have 49 students on the list.
Yes, you do.
Which is amazing. I need a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Stacy, Mike, any comments or questions? I am not going to read all of the 49 names here, but I want to wish them well. Is this an invitation? I haven't looked yet. It's the 29th of this month?
March 29th?
March 29th?
At 6:30, I believe.
And did I already ask for a motion? Yes, I did. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you so much, and congratulations to all these amazing students. What an accomplishment. Let's see, 13A.
So, on this particular resolution, we have a regularly scheduled board meeting at that time. I believe we talked about it this morning at the retreat. You know, certainly your resolution could be that you send nobody to that meeting, since we have one, unless one of you really wants to go. We can request the documents from that hearing if you'd like, but that's your decision on if you want to send somebody to that, or if you'd prefer just to get the documents electronically. And if that's the case, you would resolve to send no one, essentially.
I'm fine with the documents, so I don't miss the meeting.
Go with the documents.
Documents?
So Joan, do what?
Is that all you need
Sign,
from
or what
us?
do I do?
So I think
Or
you
do you want
probably
a
need to actually
resolution?
take a resolution to.
All right, I would then entertain a motion to that.
So
correct?
you will not appoint
Correct.
a member.
Then we would opt to
You would sign it.
choose the electronic delivery of the budget. I need a motion for that.
So moved.
Stacy?
Support.
Mike, any other comments or questions? Hearing none, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And we need a GCA SBM board alternate. I know previously, I don't know if Brian serves as a regular member, but I know Brian has attended these meetings.
I did too, I think.
And you have too.
I mean, I don't mind doing it again, but I don't know, do you want to do it this year? I don't want to take it away or anybody else.
No, you can have it.
Can we nominate Brian?
That's what I was thinking.
I like it. That's funny. I
This
don't
is
mind.
being recorded. He's gonna.
That's true.
I would entertain a nomination.
Brian Spanik.
Second it.
Okay. Remember, it's being recorded.
Right.
Okay, we have a nomination to appoint Mr. Sapanik. Any other comments or questions? Be it resolved that the Swartz Creek Community Schools Board of Education appoint Brian Sapanik to be the alternate to attend the Genesee County Association of School Board Members meetings. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All
I'll
right.
miss a meeting.
Yes.
Exactly.
He'll be thrilled. So at this point is another opportunity for public comment. If you'd like to address the board, please stand, state your name. You can also give us your address if you choose, and keep your comments to 2 minutes or less. Anyone?
I don't feel the need to stand in a group this size. You know I am Bob Hawcroft. Question about the E-Tech or whatever and becoming involved in it. I understood the process, but once it takes place, would it be in perpetuity?
Correct. Yep. You become involved in that program as a school site, and then every year thereafter, the E-rate reimbursement comes in. And so, for example, there's different percentages that you get reimbursed based on the type of hardware or software that you're buying. So if you're buying components, sometimes the reimbursement's higher than software components, but that's something that is perpetual. Yep.
Thank you for that. Anyone else? Okay. Comments and questions from the board?
Comment. Lorraine and I attended the student discipline workshop yesterday at the ISD, and put on by Mr. Banasek. And mainly it covered the new 2017 revised school code discipline requirements, which we will all need to be up to speed by. It goes in effect on August the 1st of 2017, and I'm sure there'll be some more instruction before that time. But it's a very good school, very informative, and it will make quite a bit of difference in the way that we handle discipline. And it's going to take, Mr. Minka mentioned, it's going to take some changing. We're going to have to alter some of our policies.
Do you have materials from that we can share to the whole board?
I can give you a copy of
Okay,
the
that'd be
outline.
great, that'd be great. Thank you.
It'll have my handwritten notes, but we tried to get extra copies, but they didn't have any available.
No, but he said he would send Ben a copy of them.
Oh, that'd be
Just
great.
wanted to-
Okay. Thanks for bringing that up, Mike.
Our
Appreciate
writing
it.
wouldn't be on there.
There you go.
Anybody else?
I would just like to add to that. Part of that was the restorative justice, and it was nice to see that we're already ahead of that game, and the GISD is coming up with some of their own programs. So it's nice to see that we are coming up with our own programs with that. It was a very good class.
Good, thank you for sharing that. Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Jody, for presenting as always. And I know Brian Mitchell isn't here, but he would have asked you questions if he were here.
Oh, Mitchell, yeah.
Yep.
He would not.
He always wanted to see the double
He's not- he'll
sign,
be-
so I might have to send in his own copy.
I'm sure he's here in spirit. So thank you for that, appreciate it. And board action review.
So I'm gonna be looking into the cost of signs, the sign out at the front for the PAC, and I'm also gonna be getting summer prices, or prices for the summer work, so that for building and site, we'll have those at our next meeting that we can prepare. We are also going to be engaging in the closed bid process for the piano. We'll get that going. Did I miss anything?
I didn't see anything else. Joan, did you have anything?
No.
Anyone else? Anything else? Okay. Thank you, everybody, again, for your time. Thanks for your patience, and have an amazing rest of your week. And go